This episode of Fermented Adventure The Podcast features Matt Simon. It was recorded on location at Good Intent Cider in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. We had a fabulous time talking to Matt and enjoying their amazing ciders. Do reach out to Matt and Good Intent and let them know what you thought about the podcast. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guest. He's Matt Simon. I'm Rich Shane. Dawn Raniere's here, and this is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going?
It's going great. It's a Friday afternoon before even the Cidery opens, and we get to talk cider today. And I'm excited to understand how Good Intent Cider got started and all the history of it. So how did this cidery get started?
It basically got started, the owner, Adam, it was his hobby. He took a cider making class at Cornell, and he's from Gettysburg area, where it's like one of the best apple growing places probably on Earth, definitely in the United States. And then I picked up from him about 2 or 3 years in, and I've been doing it for between 5 and 6 years now. I've been the cider maker. I kind of stumbled backwards into it. I was a food science student at Penn State, and I was graduating, and I needed to find something to do. And I knew I wanted something hands-on. So in an old-fashioned way, I just called people on the phone that I thought I might want to learn from. And Adam picked up, and it kind of went from there.
Have you or had you always had an interest? Do you have a memory of your first cider experience?
Cider specifically, not really. Like, I had an interest in distilling, fermenting, beer making. I kind of tried to take as many classes as I could at Penn State about that. But hard cider, I was kind of a basic stuff you get at the grocery store kind of guy until I started and then really got into it. But me being kind of a nerd and my brain being obsessive, then I started to learn pretty quickly, I think.
When you shared that experience with Adam, I mean, it sounds like it's almost like taking that master class, going from your undergrad, your bachelor, stuff like that. But you're taking a master class in cider making. Was that the experience for you, getting that kind of hands-on training?
Kinda, yeah. It was that and a lot of educated guesses on my part. I kind of had, the theory and background knowledge, and then after a while, and it was pretty short, under a year, after a while, it was like, okay, you go, you got it. And I guess I didn't screw up too bad.
Well, you said after 5 or 6 years.
I got it now, yeah.
How did they come up with the name Good Intent Cider?
So the street that Adam grew up on is Good Intent Road, and they just took it right from that. Just
simply, hey, this is the street we grew up on, right?
Yeah, and it does have a cool ring to it. It sounds like it could be more cryptic than that, but nope, it is right off the street he grew up on.
With your training or your experience going from that food science background to where you are now, what were some of those aha moments for you? I mean, you're walking into an established cidery. They have fans. And now you're bringing your own experience and your own impression on even some of the things that we're going to try today. But what were some of those moments for you now getting to do that hands-on of making cider?
So I thought about this. I think the biggest one was trying to let go and do my own thing. For the first couple of years, I wanted to have as many things as we had been making to be exactly the same, which is impossible because it's fruit and we don't use any additives or water or anything, so it's going to be different. I think the big change was when I kind of got to just let loose and do what I wanted to do the way that I would do it. And I think same thing for Adam too, because he's like, you got it, you do what you think is best. And I think between that and then just working behind the bar for a couple of years was also a big thing, because people would ask me what's the best, yada yada, and I would say, you tell me. Like, everyone likes different things, and so it was kind of market research. I would go grab something from a tank, run over here, let people try it, like go from there. So that transition of kind of, I guess, letting go of what I thought things should be and what people are going to enjoy the most, and like kind of finding that balance, that was a big deal.
It sounds to me what you're saying is your initial try was to create ciders that you wanted people or thought they would enjoy, and not really having a good base of understanding what they would enjoy, pleasing them. But once you went after the flavors and things that you wanted to make,
right,
that was that big aha moment.
And it's like it's like a balance. You want to give people what they want, but you also want to give them what they don't know they want yet. And that's a big thing.
You know what, you say that, and it's interesting because, all right, you've been making cider now for 5 or 6 years. You know, we've had those beginning historical moments with the Angry Orchards and those that have set the precedents. But now we have that craft cider industry that we're in today. Good Intent is how old? When did they start?
So we're coming up about 10 years. We've been in this location in Bellefonte for, I think it's between 7 and 8 now. The cidery itself existed for a couple of years just at like farmers markets and stuff like that. So yeah, we're coming up about a decade. So kind of right around the boom period for cideries, like nationwide. Where
we are now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you said, we were talking before we recorded, and now there are, at least in this area, 3 cideries, when at the time you were the only one for years.
Yeah. And statewide, it's more than that. When we go to the farm show, there's a ton. But that's kind of natural because, like I said, Gettysburg area, Adams County is one of the best places for growing apples in the country. It's right up there with Pacific Northwest and Michigan. So it makes total sense to have that many cideries here.
I want to circle back to something you said in an understanding, because you said you worked some time behind the bar. So you got to meet the customer directly. You also have been able to have that mental exercise of, hey, you just make for you. And sometimes the customer doesn't know what they want. But if you keep making excellent cider, that's just going to continue to create those raving fans, and those fans that want to just drink all kinds of cider and different ciders. From your standpoint, though, in understanding that, you know, right now, like we're in the 10th year, let's say, of what Good Intent is, and of basically that cider boom. Where still do you see that cider customer, the one that you were in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania? We're about 10 miles outside of State College, where Penn State is. What do you still see the response? I mean, we've seen you at the Cider Fest in Gettysburg, where there's that thing was crazy with how many cider fans and cider drinkers were there. But where do you see the cider drinker today when they come into the cidery?
Well, here specifically is really interesting because we're close to Penn State, where a lot of the population switches out every 4 years. So it's kind of changing all the time. When we very first opened, we were kind of the neighborhood bar. There wasn't a lot of places to drink at all. And so we had all kinds of people. Some people that came to drink a beer. They didn't even want cider. And then now we're kind of shifting to where now it's a lot of like grad students, people coming out from Penn State, which was always there, but it's definitely growing. But it's kind of all over the place, and cider doesn't neatly belong to any category. It's not distilling, it's not beer. So you get all kinds of people. You get people that stumble in because they saw it. You get people that are like cider snobs. You get people that have never had hard cider. It's all over the place. And so you just kind of help people pick out what you think they're going to like and hope for the best, and obviously make really good cider.
In your craft, because that's what you are, you're a craftsman that makes good, really great cider. Where do you see trends in the cider industry going right now? And where do you see your imprint on those trends?
That's tough to say. I think the trend for cider right now is definitely away from the bigger commercial ciders. And it's sort of becoming more like the wine industry, where you're seeing variety specific things. Definitely a lot more adventurous flavors than what there used to be. So you're seeing stuff that has hot pepper or hops or all kinds of stuff that, you know, the big cideries wouldn't really touch. We're kind of right in the middle of that. We're adding single varieties all the time. Crabapple ciders. You know, we have a cider that has Earl Grey tea added. It's kind of all over the place. Really, like I said, cider not belonging to anybody is kind of liberating, because there's not as many rules as wine. If you add Earl Grey tea to wine, people might riot. But cider, it's fine. Nobody will say anything as long as it's good, which is really cool.
What's interesting is you're saying that. I'm thinking that's pretty, you know, that's a really interesting thing, because look, you can make a cider cocktail. You can add Earl Grey and introduce that and how that's going to mix with the flavor profile of the apples and different brightness, acidity, but nobody's going to make a wine cocktail. No. That's where I think you really have the ability to have a deeper palate or a deeper medium to play with.
Totally. Yeah, there's not as many rules. Guidelines, maybe, but...
It's like just that old, you know, ride you did as a kid where you could run the raceway, where there was at least bumpers on one side, bumpers on the other. Yeah. But as a kid, you didn't know. You just, you know, tried to go as fast as you could, and you know, as long as you stayed in the guardrails, you were fine.
Yep. I mean, I have my own sort of internal rules and, like, quality sort of specifics, but in general, you can do sweet, you can do dry, you can do hops, you can do kind of whatever you want to do, which is really neat. And I mean, obviously I'm into that because I get to play around and have fun, and that's the best part, obviously, coming up with something new and different and then getting people to like it. Like the Earl Grey tea one, people thought I was absolutely out of my mind. And then once we got it down, it became like one of the biggest hits of that year.
That was, what's the name? That was, it was
British Imposter.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. We've had that. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. And I think maybe that would be the one that, where I felt like that was when I was officially the cider maker, because people thought, that's weird. There's this weird guy doing this stuff. And then, oh, actually, it's really good. So then it was unofficially, okay, he's got this.
But at the end of the day, you know, let's say that you run with it and look, it becomes this huge hit. it's like anything else. You try, you see how it works. Maybe you need to tweak it somewhere.
Yep.
But look, I understand the apples and the juice are expensive. But to the upside of what you can discover if you play around a little bit is somewhat,
definitely
more mind-blowing for people when they try it versus, never trying it or, hey, all right, it didn't work. We lost some juice, but that's okay.
Well, we have a huge variety right now, too. There's 13 different ciders on. So I tell people, you shouldn't like all of them. That would be unreasonable. We're going to take some chances for sure. I always say there should be at least one you like or I have failed, but you should not like a few too. And I'm not the kind of person that's going to have an ego problem if somebody at the bar doesn't like something. That's just what people are like. And so, but those are the people that I single out, actually. If I step behind the bar and somebody is making like a nasty sick face, I want to talk to them because they're going to be honest. Somebody that's just, I love everything, that's not helpful. And I guess that's just kind of my personality of being a perfectionist, maybe. But those are the people that you're making a sick face, I'm going to make you try everything now because you're going to be honest with me.
I think that's a good way to be. And, like for Dawn and I when it comes to beer, we love stouts, porters, we love everything very well. We're not huge IPA fans. So we're almost the kind of person where you want to come up to us and say, we don't necessarily like bitter. But if you were to serve us a bitter cider, we still might enjoy that. Or a hop cider. I love hop cider. Yep. I love the way the floral comes out of a hop cider versus how it comes out in an overly hopped beer. Right. So, we're definitely those kind of people that come in and you're going to want to say, if you don't think you like this, we're going to find something you like.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like pharmacology. It's the dose that makes the poison. And so, I'm not against anything just outright in terms of a flavor. It's just has to be balanced correctly.
In a certain measure.
And that's my thing with IPAs is that it's gotten to a level of a joke. I'm not against bitter at all. I love bitter things. I like Negronis. I like bitter cocktails. But it's just only bitter that I have a problem with. And even that, I can appreciate anything that's well made. It just might not be my favorite thing. But yeah, I'm more of a stout guy, porter guy.
All right, that's where we'll be at the bar later. We'll be doing some stouts and porters. You mentioned Adams County.
Yeah.
And, we also talked about wines and those single varietals. And, that's some of the feedback I get. That, now we're really focusing and honing in on that one apple, similar to what one varietal, similar to what, winemaker or wine producer would do with Chardonnay or, Cabernet grapes. Are there specific apples that you're really looking to hone and say, these are those varietals that we're looking to bring out and highlight and showcase in our cider?
I think definitely the biggest success story for apples for us is the Wixon, the crab apple cider, which we had to pay somebody to grow them for us because they thought, why would you want that? And there's only a handful of people that have those apples in the country. And it just took off like a rocket once we could get it. It's a little bit more hard to do than grapes because the grapes are out there. Apples are there's this weird sort of archaeology thing going on where people need to find them and cultivate them because there's so many apples that are just gone. And
from Prohibition,
right,
that wiped out so many different varietals.
They tore everything up.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of really starting to crawl out of that, which is really neat. There are people that's all they really do is find all these old apples and try to bring them back, which is really neat. But the Wixon is definitely the one that it's undeniably crazy good. I don't know why you wouldn't want to farm it. They are little, well, they're not tiny, tiny apples. But people hear crab apple and they just think, oh, no, but they're tasty.
Well, that's the stuff I grew up, as a kid, and you never ate it. It was just dry and mealy and all kinds of nastiness. But but that's what makes a perfect cider varietal, because once you press it and get that juice out and start letting the yeast and the fermentation happen and those natural sugars, you're going to get this whole fascinating flavor profile.
And it's strangely not one-to-one. There are apples that you would not want to eat, and they make delicious cider, and vice versa. A lot of really bitter apples taste really good as cider. Some don't.
You mentioned this varietal, and you said, you go to your providers, those that are, running these orchards for you, and you say, hey, could you start growing these for us? Because now you're thinking 3-4 years out in terms of what you'd like to start to make cider out of.
Oh, definitely.
If you're not able to get that juice today, right?
Right. Yeah, that was, the owner, Adam, Mike Wixon, was kind of like a passion thing for him. I think it was my second year making cider that they had fruit to use on them, and it wasn't very much, but it was one of those of, we will pay you to grow these. Will you grow them? And they thought, why would you want it?
That was one of the conversations we've had with different cider producers out of CiderCon this year.
Yeah.
You talk about these single varietals, and if you can promise a farmer, if you can say to that orchard, hey, if you set aside this much land and start to grow and graft these apple varietals, we'll buy it all, right?
Yeah.
And you're almost contracting, and you don't have that middle person, right?
Yeah.
This creates a nice synergy between you as a cider maker and those as an orchard to say, look, if I keep doing this, we help this varietal grow, and we help the whole industry.
Yeah. And you also have people that just have weird trees. Hey, do you want to try this? Sure. We'll give it a shot. We have one on right now, Topaz, and that's a really modern apple. It's not historical or anything. And that was just, hey, well, you want to give this a shot? And okay. And it turned out really well. But it's one of those things where, since there aren't so many rules, you just try.
Matt, what's exciting for me, and in this discussion, just getting a really strong basis of understanding your personality, the way you bring your love of cider now to what you're making. But I also have these glasses here, these cups filled with cider, and I can't wait for you to take us on a little tour. You mentioned Topaz, and one of these is Topaz. Where should we start? I got an FR, a W, an M, an MN, an NMS, and a Topaz.
Well, here's the thing. We used to have a tasting order that everything should be tried in, and I kind of got rid of that.
Okay.
I think that's a little snotty for my taste. So, let's see. I'll take a stab at it. I think, let's start with the seasonal one, the Fireside Matt.
Fireside
named
Matt.
after me.
Yep, there you go. Why not start with something named after you?
That was the one they named after me. It's our plum juice and winter spices. It's got like cinnamon and clove and all that good stuff. Kind of what I came up with because I refused to do pumpkin spice or apple pie. That's what I came up with. So I thought winter, sugar plums, plum, kind of worked backwards from there.
Oh, that's good.
I love the warming nose on that. Now, my question is, where, the plums, where does the flavor, what do they impart? Is it more sugar, sweetness? Because I'm getting this, warming on the nose. But
it's a little more sweetness. It's mostly just like fruitiness. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of color, too. That was like a pleasant surprise. This year we had white plum. Previous years we've had red, and so it gives it like a brown color, which people are like, oh, spices, it's brown. So it was kind of a happy accident that you get a really cool coppery color from it, too.
on the palate, I get 3 different experiences. I get the sweetness and the plums and the apple right up front. Then it goes to this dryness where you get the apple really coming into play and the tannins, right? And then you get the spice just sits there. I feel like I just enjoyed this big slice of pumpkin pie. But in this case, it's plum pie.
Right.
It's apple plum pie. I want like a slice of this. You know how they throw the crust or a whole pie into making a beer?
Yep.
I can almost like feel the crust coming out because I want it there so bad.
Right. Yeah. Your mind does that. That was,
and I wonder if it's some of the yeast that may still reside that brings that bready, that flourness.
A little bit of richness. Yeah. That could be. When people ask what it tastes like, I just say Christmas usually. And they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, you'll see.
See, one of these things this is why I love trying this and then getting your perspective on it. But it's almost like this. I feel like I'm visiting somebody's house and this is the dessert they serve today.
Right.
But this is just wonderful.
It was definitely one of those ones of people always want apple pie. Pumpkin spice is one that stumped me for a while. And that was one of, well, I want to get a little more creative because I feel like anyone's going to do apple pie. And so I started to look at Vossel recipes and old mold wine recipes. And then after I looked at, maybe 20 of those, I started to like work backwards from there. So instead of just being like, this is what goes in apple pie, I wanted to look at, well, what would normally go in there? What do I want to tweak? I definitely wanted to turn the cinnamon down a little bit because cinnamon is always there. And I wanted it to be not so heavy. Because, I love fall. I love Halloween and stuff. I always want a pumpkin beer and I always regret it after half of it because it's just too much. And so I wanted it to be, Christmassy, fall, winter, but like drinkable.
I'm curious. Even on that thought process, you could have done something, or you may have already done something where you do, let's say, a squash. You don't have to do pumpkin. You could do a butternut. You can do an acorn.
You definitely can.
And I don't know if that's something you've done as a cider. Or maybe now you will do it.
So, actually, I felt a little silly because I thought, well, pumpkin is... Now you're kind of making beer because pumpkin is starch. Which is maybe food science, like chemistry brain. Because I'm thinking, if it's not sugar, and you're having to turn starch into sugar, that's beer. But then, biologically, pumpkin is a fruit. It grows on a vine. So, depending on what your definition of fruit is, you definitely could make a pumpkin cider, and technically, it would be all fruit. But then in my head, starch is not fruit.
See, so. I love this. Just kind of, I'm watching you work through in your head just the technicality of this,
right?
And I think that's why we've enjoyed your cider. Now, our first visit to Bellefonte was 5 years ago, and they're just amazing ciders. But technically speaking, that's a very technical cider as far as what I would say. There's so not from the production of it, but from the layers as a consumer. It's not just I'm drinking this sweet cider or this. There's so many things to play with there, and I can see where that technicality comes in. That food scientist that says, it's not a fruit, but it is a fruit. I don't want to make beer because it's a starch.
Sweetness is a big thing for us because everything is semi-dry, and just this last year we finally put a sweet one on, which that's one of the things, first thing you hear, what's sweet, what's not sweet. That's like the number one thing that people kind of have to go on. And it's an interesting thing because a lot of people don't want it as sweet as they think they want it. And then some people want it sweeter than we have. We finally debuted a sweet one. And my strategy with that was to, instead of trying to make a plainer cider more exciting with sugar, I picked the very best cider so that it could stand up to the sugar. And that was a big thing. So that it has enough apple flavor that you're not just tasting essentially sugar water, which would be a huge waste of cider. And that one turned out really well, but it's, we're small enough that we can think like that.
Do you think it's the whole wine experience? Do you like a sweet wine? Do you like a dry wine? Do you like a red wine? Do you like a white wine? That the consumer's already given that construction of thought that this is what they apply it to.
I think, yeah, it's just the closest thing people have to go on.
Sweet, dry, what do you like?
Unless they are, really experienced cider drinker, that's like the next closest thing. But it's just one of those things where you just have to try a few, and then it clicks. Cider is cider.
That's like for Dawn and I.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the fact that, if you go to a, let's say, a Thai restaurant, and they say, well, how spicy do you want it? Mm-hmm. Well, Dawn likes really spicy. I like moderately spicy. But what you may say to me, well, that moderately spicy, that was just way too much spice.
Completely
Where Dawn
subjective.
said, so when you say I like sweet versus even spicy cider, you've got that the one spiced cider on your draft list. I mean, I may say, well, that's too hot for me.
Yeah.
Dawn may say,
delicious.
I want it hotter. The hotter, the better.
Yes.
So it's hard to really gauge what somebody says, I like sweet, right?
Yes. It's super subjective, which is a whole other food science thing that was drilled into me. Taking all these classes where people are doing, panels and trying different things and the whole sensory part of it. And it's not one size fits all. Food is just not like that. You can't make the ultimate cider 100% of people will like. It's just not possible. You just kind of have to make there's different segments. Somebody comes in, I don't like cider. Well, what do you like? I like hoppy beers. Boom. Hop Tide. That's kind of like, I would hope my bartending legacy here was that's how I worked, is I would work backwards. Not people, what's the best cider? And I would say, ignore that. What's your favorite thing to drink? Like, period. If I could hand you anything. And then we're going to work backwards. And generally, that's kind of how I try to think about it. Sometimes it gets hard. One time somebody's was tequila neat. And I thought,
Well, if you say tequila neat, I think juicy. I think there's a little bit
where
of,
I ended up with.
kick
I thought,
to it.
so
Yep.
so you want something maybe fruity, work backwards from there, and most of the time that works out for people. But it's, there's just not the same kind of language that people know off the top of their head as they do for wine or beer or stuff like that. And then there's the whole problem with everything is subjective. Mm-hmm. So even if you have the vocabulary, two people are going to tell you two different things.
Yeah, and what did I eat before I got here?
Tongues.
Right? And have I gone to Big Spring and have I had some cocktails or some spirits? Have I gone to a brewery? Have we just eaten some spicy food? Have we just had coffee to drink? Mm-hmm. It could be anything, right?
Right.
So where are you taking us next?
All right. So,
I should put the letters facing you.
Right.
Pardon the interruption. If you like what you hear, if you love what you're hearing, please share the podcast. Please take a screenshot of the podcast, post it on your social media, tag us just to let everybody else know about Fermented Adventure the Podcast. We'd be grateful for your help to grow our podcast.
Let's do my favorite one. So we'll do the Freakin' Rouge. That's another single variety. Actually, that's not true.
That's not your favorite. They're all your favorites.
It's tough. That is the one that I am drinking right now. It's a blend of Freakin' Rouge and Dabinette apples. It's a little less alcoholic for us. It's 6.7. Most of ours are 8 and up. And it is super, super appley. And it's actually sweeter than most other things we have by about double. But it's so tannic, it finishes very, very dry. So it's like, in my opinion, perfectly well-rounded. You get sweetness, you get apple, but you finish dry. And it's just super drinkable.
The nose is so juicy.
Yes.
It's so... I just feel like I walked into the day you were pressing apples.
Right.
And there's so much of that effervescence of apples here in the cidery. And you can almost feel like you can hear the tractors and the hay rides going on.
Yes.
This is what this is on the nose, easy.
Yeah.
So I like sweet. And for me, they're both perfect for me. Because they're not overly sweet, but they have that sweetness. And then they kind of finish dry, and it kind of lingers. Like for that one, the clove just kind of stays in my mouth.
Yeah.
That one I'm still trying to figure out, but it keeps that flavor like longer, which I really like.
Yeah. Well, there's a fully dry cider can be really good, but most people, that would be an acquired taste. You need some sugar, and it is kind of fun when you're playing around with adding sugar, how different things will start to taste. Something will taste fruity that absolutely did not, with just a little sugar, like not necessarily a lot, and then getting that kind of dialed in. That one threw me through a loop because I had to add much more sugar than I normally would, because it's so tannic, so dry. It absolutely needed it, or it was like drinking apple sandpaper.
It's got such a unique flavor, though. I love it.
The color in this is almost like a nectarine.
It is a really neat color.
And I think the color is deceiving because when I see this, I'm expecting citrus. I'm expecting orange notes, tangerine notes. And to the point of this almost finishes, for a brief, when you said tannic, it almost finishes barrel-aged. I get this barrel woody characteristic, but it's the skins. There's a bitterness to this.
Right.
There's so much here. When you talked about, and somebody said, hey, Matt, what's your favorite? I think what becomes the favorite, and I think the personality, and I'm always curious about, what's Matt's personality for making cider? And we're going to kind of learn that, at least for me, but you may have a sense when you're working in those guardrails. The portfolio stands up. You've made consistent, excellent cider that, look, what's your favorite? They're all your favorite, but the consistency through the portfolio is what's there.
Right. I think that one helps that I'm having a fling with that one. Okay. It's a newer cider. It's a newer one, so it's my favorite.
People ask me, hey, which is your favorite, right? The one we just picked up, right?
Well, and then you get people try to trick you, and they say, what's your least favorite? And they're always surprised because I say Eve's Revenge right away, the spicy one. And they're like, oh, I wanted to try that. And I said, oh, it's not because you're not going to like it. It's because the pepper lives in the bottle. So once that pepper's in that bottle, I'd have zero control. And so it's my job to make it taste the same, and that I can't possibly do that.
You could have one pepper that just blows it out.
Right.
You could have one pepper that's mild. There's no... somebody says, there's pepper here? I don't even taste it.
That's the whole fun of it, is that the pepper is in the bottle. But people say, how spicy is it? And I say...
We'll find out.
We got to try it. Yeah, we got to... let's see. Because it's spicier all the time.
Well, we're going to find out, aren't we? At some point.
At some point,
I know you guys want to try that one.
Which one are we going to next?
All right. Let's do the Wixon, the crab apple. We talked about that one. That one's kind of got a...
I get strawberry or a berry on the nose right away. And I shouldn't say these things. I shouldn't say these things because I don't want to lead, sometimes when you say that profile, right? It's almost like you're suggesting that versus getting a chance to try it and see your own experience.
It definitely has a fruity nose to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got something other than apple. It's very fruity.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, it's like, you go through the succession of tries and they all stand on their own. but there's something about this one, the brightness, the acidity, the sourness.
Definitely.
I feel like this, I just ate a bunch of Sour Patch Kids or whatever that is, right?
People, we get Sour Patch Kids, we get Sweet Tart, people say it tastes like. It's crab apple, so it's definitely tart.
My experience with that, it's like my mouth is salivating and I want more.
Yes.
It's almost like pouring gasoline on a fire. It just keeps raging. The more I drink, the more I salivate, the more I want more.
I think especially after the last one you tried too, it's on the other end of the spectrum. It's not very tannic. It's fruity, lush, kind of floral. People say that one tastes like a Riesling. They have that to go off of.
I see that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That is right there.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you have a wine lover, it's, I don't like cider, but I love wine. Yep. I would definitely go down that road with them.
Oh, that's my favorite. I love when people come in with a group and they are... I don't want to try anything. I don't like cider. Those are the best.
I'm going to go pout in the corner.
That's the challenge.
That's the most fun for me. If I get to be behind the bar, usually I don't. I'm just like fill in. But those are my favorite. When somebody tries something and they swear up and down they're not going to like cider, we can usually find something for them.
With that, if you're a sour beer drinker, that fits into where you are too, without having to deal with any of the finished bitterness of any of the hops or any of the impartation of other flavors that beers are going to give you.
Not quite as funky as like a sour beer, which you can do that with cider. A little riskier when you're working with fresh juice instead of water and oats and things like that. But that one's, it just is that way. That's the way that apple tastes. It's one of those ones that's a 1-to-1. That apple tastes like that when you try it fresh, which is kind of shocking for people.
Matt, I'd be curious on that. What does that, I don't know what yeast you're using, but what happens if you use more of a farmhouse, style or a wild yeast, and where would that take that, do you think?
You can do it. You definitely get a little bit more funkiness. You get
I'm hoping I'm planting a seed, and then you can call that the Fermented Adventure series. I don't know.
Yeah. It's it all depends on which juice, which yeast. Some things are better than others. Some are fruitier than others. Temperature is also a big thing. Ferment it cold. Ferment it warmer. We tend to try to stick with the more fruity, forward, sort of like champagne yeasts that ferment everything out nice and clean. Another thing is just practicality reasons. We ferment everything dry. So a farmhouse yeast might crap out, and then there's still some fermentable sugars in there that critters could munch on. Something could... From a stability standpoint, all of our stuff is pretty high alcohol, fermented out completely dry. Then it's kind of bomb-proof from like a storage standpoint. That's kind of just a space issue. There's all kinds of stuff that you could do, and like I said, that there's no rules. But just from a practicality standpoint, I want things to be as clean as they can be for storage, and then from there we turn it into all kinds of stuff. So I want it to store really well, because from there it could get turned into 5-6 other different ciders. And then I have played with some yeasts, like if we're going to add strawberry juice or blueberries or something. That's usually on a secondary ferment is when I like to play with that.
I'm excited. Like when you keep talking, I want to keep drinking. I mean, I'm like your ideas. I'm like I almost want to camp out outside waiting for you to create your next cider. We live 3 hours away. It's just not close enough. You've got the Gettysburg location, or you had the Gettysburg location. Is that still open too?
Yep.
That's still open. So for those that are near Gettysburg, that's 2 hours outside of Philly. For those that are outside of Bellefonte, that's 3 hours. You're about a half an hour outside of State College. So you serve the western part here. You're almost sort of centrally located. So All Points, Pennsylvania, somebody can get here or some way get your good intent cider somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you shipping right now out of state? How do people get a hold of some of your ciders if they're not in the area?
Right now, it's kind of, you got to go to one of our tasting rooms in Gettysburg or here, and farmers markets, and then a handful of bars in the area. We haven't really been shipping. During the darkest parts of COVID, we were delivering. I was driving around delivering cider to people. But yeah, you kind of have to look for us. But the tasting room is the best place to come.
Here's what happens when they find you. Then they're going to want to find a way to get it shipped to them.
Right, yeah.
Everybody coming out of state college, maybe they're from out of state. Now they got to find a way to get back here to get more of your cider.
Totally, yeah, because the population rotates out so much.
Yeah.
We've heard from people all over. Somebody in, Austin, Texas, somebody in Maine. Oh, I know that place, which is really weird, but it is a smaller world than you would think it is.
But when you start producing, you get those cider people that want to seek out really great cider. And when you find that you get that, like good intent, how do I get a hold of more of this? And this is the sad part. We find this all the time. Dawn and I will find our favorites throughout the country that we've experienced. And you'll see on their social media that they're doing a limited release or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys suck because we can't you're not going to ship that bottle. And even if you do, it's, $20-$30 for shipping and whatever. And, but look, we're just going to have to buy one of those Airbnb houses that we talked about.
There you go.
to get to good intent. Which one should we go to next? We got two here and I'm like they just keep getting better and better.
Let's do barrel aged. Let's do North meets South. That is like one of the all-time classics. It was here when I started. It will always be here. Always
Dawn's laughing
favorite.
Because I just stuck my nose. That one was filled higher than the other ones.
To get a good sniff.
Yeah, she's just laughing.
Been known to do
I'm
that.
laughing to myself.
Yeah. I just got that look. It's too bad we don't videotape the whole podcast so you can see me sticking my whole nose in the cider. Oh, it smells so good.
So good.
Well, I'm always a sucker for anything barrel aged.
Yep.
That's another example of where do you draw the line?
Oh, man.
If it's too barrel aged.
I don't like barrel aged, but that's perfect.
Right.
It's not overly.
Too barrel aged just tastes like messed up whiskey.
Yeah.
Like it won't.
That's amazing.
It loses all its cideriness. So like you need it to be like just right. It doesn't take too long. Usually about a month or two.
That's good.
So talk about the barrel. Talk about the apple varietal and how this all comes together. You said North meets South. I'm picturing, the Union and the Confederacy and how all this is working.
Right, yeah. So that the name comes from, the apples come from Gettysburg. And then the barrels come from, the other side of the Mason-Dixon line. So it's North meets South.
We talking Kentucky? We talking Tennessee?
So they're bourbon barrels. So we used to get all of our barrels from John Bowman Distillery.
Okay, that's in Virginia.
Look that up.
Yeah, John J. Yep, we love them. That's a great distiller. That's in Virginia.
And they, I believe, share mash bill with Buffalo Trees.
Well, they're owned by Sazerac.
There are the whiskey nerds out there. That's kind of like where we're coming from.
That's a great whiskey. Those are great barrels.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. You mentioned, and let's see what we can do, because you mentioned you're in Gettysburg, right? Mm-hmm. You got Mason-Dixon Distillery not too far from there, and you're calling this North meets South, right?
Yeah.
So let's get some of those barrels out of Mason-Dixon. You got the apples coming out of Gettysburg.
Yeah, could be.
All right, peer pressure.
But yeah, that was the whole Civil War sort of theme.
I'll tell you, if they had this during the Civil War, they probably just would have put down arms and hugged each other, hugged it out.
Hopefully.
And we could have fixed it without all those people going to battle. This is a nice blend of the apple varietal, as you talked about, where that barrel comes in and everything gets lifted to this certain drinkable point.
Like how you were saying, people that don't like barrel-aged or whiskey, I'm usually like, try it anyway.
Yeah, this is good.
You don't have to like it, but you might be surprised. A lot of people say, I didn't think so, but it's really good.
I can't say that I've ever had a cider that I would be curious to make an old-fashioned out of. Because sometimes, to your point, they get over oaky, or they're just not barrel aged, or there's just a funkiness to them that it's okay. And I love everything barrel aged, but this is the first time I've had a barrel aged cider where I could say, I wonder how this would come up as an old fashioned.
So what I have done at home is, it's really not complicated. Just put a couple of drops of the bitters you like.
So you have done this.
And then call it a day.
So I'm not inventing anything new.
Yeah. It's
little orange.
I like
orange
Manhattans.
peel.
I like old fashioned, so I've played with it. But I think for that flavor, it's like you just need a dash or two of bitters and you're there. Because obviously you're not wanting to add a ton more extra sugar. It's already boozy enough. You're not wanting to add vermouth or things like that. Yeah, I like to add bitters to it. It's really good.
All right, that's going to be our first order of business of trying to make an old fashioned out of that.
It's good. I actually I have some bitters on order for the bar. They're coming Saturday.
All right, we're just going to sleep here. That's
it. They're I got Fee Brothers makes a cranberry bitters. So my thought process would be we could add a few drops of Christmas cheer, which is going to be cranberry bitters. But I guess I do like bitters more than the average person. Bitters and soda water is like a big thing for me at home. But I just like bitters. I can confirm it is good as an old-fashioned.
Well, thank you. Thank
drink.
you. See, I was starting to play with that in my head, but you've already confirmed that.
Yes.
This Topaz is waiting. This is one of the ones you mentioned. So talk about this a little bit.
Okay, so that one is similar to Wixon, but even more so. Even more fruity, even more tart. People say it tastes like grapefruit. So much so that when I first made it, I thought I had royally screwed something up. It's one of those ones, if you didn't know it was made out of apples, I would be surprised that you could guess. It's just that weird of an apple.
Now, Topaz is the apple varietal?
Crimson Topaz.
Crimson Topaz is the name of it.
the variety, yeah.
Dawn's already not giving this to me.
Wow,
what did you do?
So good.
So that's one that, in my own head, one of the clever things I have is like I pretend that it's like a doctor. First do no harm. So it's like, that's that apple, and all I did is not mess it up.
More so than any of the ones that we've tried so far, this has more of a viscous mouthfeel.
Yeah, it does.
It's thicker, and I can see those brightness notes of the grapefruit. It's very acidic, certainly as it comes through. That Wixon that we tried, I think we talked about that experience where I had that, mouth salivation. This one I get a little of that, but there's so many other notes that play on this.
Yeah.
How did you think you screwed that up? Because that's just tremendous. These are all great.
They're all good.
And it's almost like when I point out to some people, you've given us 5 different expressions of what good intense cider is. You're the conductor. You almost like, okay, you over there, the Wixon, you point to them and they come up and they rise, and then you get the frickin' Rouge and that comes up. There's so many different, if anybody's here in the Gettysburg and the Bellefonte area, you're probably going to get more opportunity to drink across the board all your SKUs here. But you really are going to have a great experience.
I hope so, yeah. We don't just have 13 varieties, like, for the heck of it. Like, we really want them to be
Wait, we
different.
have that empty tap. Let's fill that up with something.
Yeah.
Gasoline, here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that one, it was just, you know, fermenting it out, smelling what it smelled like. It was so completely different that I was, what is going on with this? And it's just because it's a really neat apple. And that is one it's a modern apple. It's not like a cider nerd apple.
I get like candy apple.
Yeah. And it's just...
It's like a Jolly Rancher apple,
Yeah,
right?
or like a candy apple, like for...
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
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 Which I haven't had in so long, so this is nice.
Yep. If you want to pick out someone that's cheating and adding apple flavor, Jolly Rancher apple is like what you need in your head. If you taste Jolly Rancher apple, you turn that sucker around.
There's no apple in that.
There's some sort of flavoring a lot of the time. It's not impossible, but yeah.
As a consumer, that's what we compare it to. But I love what you said about this being a candy apple. Mm-hmm. You get I almost feel like you're biting into that crisp, sugary outer shell.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. Matt, you've been doing this for 5 and 6 years now.
Yeah.
Where do you see, like I said, you're impacting with good intent. You're impacting the cider industry. You're really putting your imprint. We saw you at the Cider Fest in Gettysburg, where we got to see, there's like 25 different cideries. So you get to really experience so many different personalities. Mm-hmm. But your line, long all day. So you see that you're leading the way in a lot of ways in the cider industry. Where do you see that for you?
Wow, that's heavy. I don't know about that.
You're humble, aren't you?
I gotta not think about that. I gotta just make what I want to make as good as I can make it. Some people, like the Earl Grey was a good example. Can you do that? We got that. Can you do that? It's not against the law or anything. I just want to make it as best as I can, and then that's what I'm worried about. If people like it and it's as good as it can be, I've done my job. But also, it's not one size fits all. There's all kind of different people that like all different kind of things and all different kind of ciders, so there's room for everybody. But it is really neat that I, get to be creative, get to do what I want to do. Which, after college, that's kind of what I was looking for.
What's your family's feedback on, you show up, I'm sure they're happy to see you with bottles of cider, but
Definitely.
What's some of their feedback on what you've, created and just produced from this experience of being a cider maker?
Pretty close to what I would say the general public is. Like, what is this? Tell me about it. Do you have a sweet one? Like what you would hear from a lot of people. And then similar growth. I think they definitely think it's really cool that I get to do something fun and interesting. They thought it was really neat that my name was on one of the bottles. They have those around on their shelves. But yeah, not too different than, I would say, the average person. They weren't, super cider people. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, so we're right down the middle.
Okay, I've never met, just for disclosure, I've never met anybody from Omaha, Nebraska. So thank you for being my first Nebraskian. What do they call them? Nebraskan.
Yeah.
Okay.
But people, it's funny because we're in central Pennsylvania, and when I tell people I'm from Nebraska, they treat me like I just got off the back of a truck or something. And it's Omaha is a big city. I'm a city boy. But, yeah, it's my family, they're kind of wholesome Midwestern Coors Light kind of people. And then I come and educate them kind of a thing.
Well, I'm grateful for this point and this time that we've shared, Dawn and I, this is like, we always say, and I hope it doesn't get old, but this is part of our fermented adventure. Meeting people like you. I mean, you know, this guy from Omaha, Nebraska goes to Penn State. And he takes these courses in food sciences, and he meets and he calls around to a bunch of people. And Adam picks up the phone. Mm-hmm. You end up here, and I almost feel like that. You know, we step into a world of a craftsman. Like we have this friend Scott Wishart, Scott's Mini Wood Shop, and he does all this wood turning. And we look at his stuff, and it's like, holy cow! You're like Chagall. You're like, you know, Galileo and all these wonderful thinkers and creators. Is Galileo right? I don't even know. But what I'm saying to that point is, you know, we stepped into your artist studio and we get to benefit from your creativity and we're blessed. And to appreciate how hard you work. You mentioned, look, cider making, there's a lot of alone time to that. There's a lot of headspace where you're hoping that your idea at one point comes out like the topaz. You're like, I hope I didn't mess this up.
Right.
But you didn't. You made a phenomenal cider. These are just 5 expressions of just wonderful cider.
It is really neat to be able to be creative. I can't draw. I can't paint. I can kind of cook. I've, you know, made a living cooking since I was a kid. I wouldn't say that I'm a great cook or classically trained or anything, but that's kind of like the way that I'm coming about it, is that to me this is cooking. I'm just cooking in a weird way.
Well, you're cooking with gas, my friend, and I want to thank you for your time today. Thanks for being a friend of Fermented Adventure. Thanks for being part of our adventure. Thanks to Good Intent Cider and Adam. We're huge fans, and if you're in the Bellefonte area or the Gettysburg area or somewhere in Pennsylvania, this is a destination. Whether you're a beer or a wine or a spirit person, try this as a cider person. And if you love cider, you definitely need to put this on your bucket list of cideries to visit.
I would hope so. If you're a cider person, you got to find us. It's my favorite part is what makes this like my career and not my job is that for the first time I can like firmly stand behind it. Like I can say, no, this is some of the best. And I hope that it is. I believe that it is. But that's really cool. A lot better than, you know, working at a Starbucks or whatever. Something you can actually stand behind.
If we put the title of this, it's a lot better at working at Starbucks. That's a perfect way to, as they say, as Mike Rose says, let's land the plane there. That's a perfect place to land the plane. Thank you so much, Matt. This has been awesome. We really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, guys.